Do you ever finish a conversation with your parents and feel smaller than when it started? That knot in your stomach. The way you find yourself staring at the floor. The heavy silence in the car on the way home. Maybe you tell yourself they mean well. Maybe you brush it off as just how they are. But here's what nobody talks about. Intent doesn't erase impact. The words that shaped you in childhood don't disappear just because they came from someone who loved you. Today, we're decoding 8 phrases you might have heard growing up. These aren't just annoying comments. They carry hidden emotional weight that can follow you into adulthood. This isn't about blaming your parents or labeling them as bad people. It's about understanding what these words really meant so you can finally validate your own experience. But pay close attention to the first one, because it's the most common way parents disguise control as protection, and almost all of us fell for it. Hi Psych2 goers and welcome back. Thank you for supporting our mission to make psychology accessible to everyone. The 8 toxic phrases decoded. I'm only saying this for your own good. This phrase sounds protective, doesn't it? Like they're looking out for you. But here's what it really means. Your choices make them uncomfortable, and they're disguising control as care. When a parent says this, they're often protecting their own image or expectations rather than your well-being. Think about when you hear it. It usually comes after you've made a decision they don't approve of, a career path they find impractical, a relationship they don't understand, a boundary you've tried to set. The phrase positions them as the wise protector, and you as someone who can't be trusted with your own life. Maybe you wanted to study graphic design, but they pushed you toward accounting. I'm only saying this for your own good. Artists don't make money. Translation: your path scares me because it doesn't fit my definition of success. Their fear becomes your prison. The emotional weight this creates is guilt. Deep, persistent guilt for having your own path. It teaches you that wanting something different means you're ungrateful or naive. Over time, you might stop sharing your dreams altogether because the cost of their concern feels too high. You're too sensitive. When you hear this, it's rarely about you being sensitive. It's about your emotions making them uncomfortable. Instead of acknowledging that their words or actions hurt you, they reframe the problem as your inability to handle normal interaction. The hidden truth here is, I don't want to take responsibility for how I made you feel, so I'm going to make your emotional response the issue instead. You're at a holiday dinner. Your parent makes a pointed comment about your weight in front of everyone. When you say it hurt, they respond, "You're too sensitive. It was just an observation." Suddenly, the problem isn't their cruelty, it's your inability to handle it. The emotional weight is devastating. It teaches you that your feelings are wrong, excessive, or burdensome. You learn to suppress valid emotional responses because expressing them gets you labeled as the problem. Adults who heard this as children often struggle to trust their own emotional reactions. They second-guess hurt. They minimize pain. They apologize for having feelings at all. Deflecting your feelings is one thing, but what happens when a parent turns the basic necessities of life, like food and a roof over your head, into a weapon? That's where this next phrase comes in. I did everything for you. Providing food, shelter, and basic care is the baseline responsibility of choosing to become a parent. It's not a favor. It's not something children owe a debt for. But this phrase turns basic parenting into leverage. In reality, it means, I'm using the fact that I fulfilled my parental obligations as a tool to guilt you into compliance. It positions love as transactional. You exist, therefore you owe. You were fed, therefore you must obey. You were clothed, therefore your boundaries don't matter. The emotional weight is a debt you can never repay. Every phone call, holiday visit, and life decision gets logged as payment or charge. No amount of success will ever be enough because the debt itself is fabricated. Love becomes conditional, and you grow up believing that being cared for means being controlled. Why can't you be more like your sister? Comparison is one of the fastest ways to destroy a child's sense of self-worth. This phrase isn't really about the other person being better. It's about the parent projecting their own insecurities, disappointments, or unmet expectations onto you.
What it really means, you're not meeting the image I had in my head of who you should be, and that makes me uncomfortable. Rather than accepting you as you are, I'm going to hold up someone else as proof that you're lacking.
The emotional weight is profound. It teaches you that who you are fundamentally isn't enough. Not that you need to improve a skill or work on a behavior, but that your core self is flawed. Children who hear this grow into adults who constantly measure themselves against others. They struggle with envy, inadequacy, and the exhausting belief that they'll never be the right version of themselves. The goalposts keep moving. Your cousin just bought a bigger house. Why didn't you get that promotion? No achievement is ever enough because the comparison isn't about what you've done. It's about what the parent wishes they could claim as their own success. If you're feeling a sense of relief just hearing these patterns named, that's your validation starting. You aren't making this up. You aren't being dramatic. These dynamics are real, and recognizing them means you're already taking the first step toward breaking free. Which of these phrases did you hear the most growing up? Share your experience in the comments. It helps others realize they aren't alone. If you're feeling a bit heavy right now, take a breath. We're halfway through, and the reason we're naming these is so they lose their power over you. Comparison hurts your self-esteem, but the next phrase on our list does something even more dangerous. It actually trains your brain to view your own vulnerability as a physical threat. Stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. This is fear used as a parenting tool. When a child is already in emotional pain and a parent responds with a threat, they're not teaching emotional regulation. They're teaching that vulnerability equals danger. Beneath the surface, this is about the parent's inability to sit with difficult emotions. Your pain makes them uncomfortable, and they don't know how to handle it, so they scare you into silence. It's about the parent's inability to sit with difficult emotions, not about the child's behavior. The emotional weight this creates is a deep distrust of your own feelings. You learn that showing hurt leads to more hurt, that expressing pain makes you a target. Adults who heard this as children often struggle to cry, even when alone. They've internalized the message that their emotional expression is not just unwelcome, but actively punishable. They become experts at suffering in silence. The adult at a funeral, feeling nothing. The person going through a devastating breakup who can't cry. Not because they don't feel pain, but because somewhere deep inside, they still hear that threat. Crying means danger, so they lock it down, even when they desperately need to let it out. Here's something you can do right now if you recognize this pattern in yourself. The next time you feel the urge to cry but can't, try naming the emotion out loud. Just say, "I'm feeling sad," or "This hurts." Sometimes the act of verbalizing bypasses that childhood block. Your voice becomes proof that your feelings exist, even if the tears won't come yet. "I'm just joking, can't you take a joke?" Humor can be a beautiful way to connect. But this phrase isn't about humor. It's about saying mean things without facing consequences. When someone hurts you and then tells you it was just a joke, they're asking you to accept the hurt and abandon your right to object. The truth behind this phrase is, I want to say cruel things to you, and I don't want to be held accountable for the impact. By framing it as humor, I'm making your hurt seem like a failure of your sense of humor, rather than a result of my hurtful words. The emotional weight is gaslighting. You experienced pain, but you're told it isn't real. Over time, you stop trusting your emotional responses. You learn to perform, to laugh along with jokes at your expense, to smile when they mock you. You abandon your right to object because defending yourself makes you unable to take a joke. Does protecting someone else's comfort really have to cost you your self-respect? The answer is no. The exhaustion of pretending to find your own mistreatment funny is a signal, not a character flaw. You're just like your mom/dad. In a healthy co-parenting relationship, being compared to your other parent might be neutral or even positive. But when this phrase is used as an insult, it's a weapon. You're being used as a human shield, a stand-in for a ghost they can't confront directly. What it really means? I have negative feelings toward your other parent, and when I see traits in you that remind me of them, I'm going to punish you for it. You become the target for resentment that has nothing to do with you. The emotional weight is feeling like a burden for simply existing. You laugh a certain way and see anger flash in their eyes. You tilt your head and the temperature drops. Parts of your personality become sources of shame because they trigger your parents' pain. You can't change who you are, but you're being told that who you are is wrong. Children who hear this often feel caught in the middle, responsible for emotional dynamics they didn't create and can't fix. We've covered 7 phrases, but this last one is often the final boss of emotional manipulation. It's the one that keeps adults trapped in guilt for decades, even after they've left home. After all I've sacrificed for you. Sacrifice is part of parenting, but when it's wielded as a weapon, it stops being love and becomes manipulation. This phrase is almost always used to shut down your needs, boundaries, or independent choices. Here's what's actually happening. They've made choices in their life, and now they're holding you responsible for those choices. My sacrifices weren't gifts, they were investments, and I expect a return. Your compliance, your gratitude, your willingness to set aside your own needs to validate mine. This isn't just emotional weight, it's a trap. You feel responsible for their unhappiness. The child stops asking for things. The teenager chooses a career path they don't want. The adult stays in a job they hate because leaving would dishonor the sacrifice. You believe that pursuing your own dreams is a betrayal, that choosing yourself means their sacrifices were wasted. You might stay in situations that harm you because leaving would mean their sacrifices were for nothing. The guilt becomes a prison that keeps you from moving forward, even when every part of you knows you need to leave. But here's the truth. Love isn't something you owe, it's something freely given. Their choices were theirs. Your life is yours. Does this sound familiar to you? Maybe you heard one of these phrases. Maybe you heard all of them. Here's what's important to understand. This isn't about villainizing your parents. Many of them learned these patterns from their own childhoods. Hurt people, often without realizing it. But understanding the cycle doesn't mean you have to stay silent about the impact. Conclusion and path forward. Remember that knot in your stomach we talked about at the beginning? The one that appears after conversations with your parents? The way you found yourself staring at the floor, carrying that heavy silence? It doesn't have to stay there. Now that you know these phrases were never about your worth, you can finally look up from the floor. Not just physically, but in the way that matters most. You can start seeing your own value clearly for the first time. You've started untying those knots just by being here. Each pattern you named loosened the grip a little more. By recognizing these dynamics, you've taken back the power they had over you. But naming the wound is how you stop the bleeding. Healing it requires a different set of tools. You've identified the toxic scripts. Now it's time to rewrite them. That's exactly what we're doing in our next video on healing your inner child. I'll meet you over there to take the next step together. Your younger self has been waiting for this.